Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is the Player's Survival Guide for Mothership, 1st edition by Tuesday Night Games. Okay, first a bit of history. Mothership is a multiple Emmy award-winning game of sci-fi horror that originally appeared as what is essentially a zero edition version back in 2018. The first edition was kickstarted in 2021 and raised just over $1.4 million. It's available in the usual PDF formats, as well as a core set and a deluxe set. This book is in a small, narrow pamphlet format and sits at just 44 pages long. To the cover. Here we have an OK piece by, I assume, Sean McCoy, as it doesn't say who drew it in the credits, at least that I could see. Onto the inside. We have a list of weapons and damage as well as armour, which at this point won't mean anything. Then we get to the first page, which gives us warnings that the game is intended for mature audiences and contains violence, foul language, sexual content, drug use and depictions of mental illness, trauma, stress and panic, and as such may not be suitable for everyone. Moving on, we get straight into making your character. There are 4 stats to represent how they deal with extreme pressure: strength, speed, intellect and combat. These are all 2d10 plus 25. Then they have 3 saves: sanity, fear and body, and these are 2d10 plus 10. After this you choose one of the 4 basic classes: Marine, Android, Scientist and Teamster. These offer a broad definition of the character's background. After this, health is rolled, represented using wounds. This is a d10 plus 10. They then add on their stress score, starting at 2, and then there is their trauma response detailed here. And they choose their skills. Each class has a number of skills associated with it, and each skill has some skills that branch off into bonus skills. To gain the bonus skills, you must have at least one of the prerequisites. They then roll their loadout, trinket and patch, and then roll 2d10 times 10 for their starting credits. Additionally, they have something called high score. It details how credits are abbreviated and says that they can skip their starting loadout and instead buy their gear piecemeal, getting 2d10 times 100 credits instead. Loadouts for each class are rolled on these tables, and it stresses that though some gear is better than others, it's all useful in the hands of that class. After this, they roll a d100 and get a trinket from this table, as well as rolling a d100 to get a patch from this one. These all add a welcome amount of flavour to the game. This is followed by equipment lists, pets available in both synthetic and organic versions, and it also gives the carrying capacity, stating that the average human can carry around a quarter of their body weight, a marine can carry around 90 to 160 pounds into combat, and androids can be built to carry 1 to 5 times that amount. A fast and quick rule is that characters can carry one big thing in one hand and one little in the other. Following this, we have a double-page spread of firearms, replete with stats for them, and some nice drawings, and after this we have another double-page spread of armour that shows not only what it looks like but also what it does. It's nicely done. We then have a section called Safety Instructions. It has a small box out explaining how to be a great player. It says that you should expect characters to die, so play smart and make the most of it. Violence is punishing, meaning that if you're fighting you are losing, and the violence can be deadly and should be avoided if possible. The odds are stacked against you, and you should look at ways of evening out those odds. You'll have to make difficult choices, with that being solving the mystery or saving the day, and this is different to actually surviving the ordeal. And you'll need to pay attention, so you need to be focused and essentially plug into the world, as it helps make it more immersive for everyone, and you should expect a safe environment to play in, meaning that as a horror game it can be uncomfortable for some, so you should avoid making it any worse than it already is for your fellow players. After this it goes into a how to play section where it talks about the usual way you play a role-playing game. In Mothership, the GM is known as the Warden. It goes on to tell you how to handle the challenges, stressing out that you can attempt to do anything you want and how you should ask lots of questions. Stat checks are made to attempt to do things, though the price is usually high for failure, and saves are reactions rolled to avoid emotional, physical and mental danger. When a stat or save check has failed, you gain 1 stress, which makes you more likely to panic. Panic checks are rolled when the character snaps and the worst happens, and can lead to a condition that is usually long term. These can be treated. A good roll on a panic check can give a character focus when it is most needed. When they get hurt, they lose health, gaining wounds when they've lost enough health, and when they hit their maximum wounds, they die. It points out that 90% of situations are handled using these principles. We have a box out on dice notation where it mentions the different dice used, and it has a handy player suppliers checklist where it tells you what you need. Moving on, we get to stat checks and saves. A stat check is rolled on a D100 whenever anything is attempted, with lower than your stat being good. A 90 to 99 is always a failure. Failing a stat check gives you 1 stress. It tells you what the various stats can be used for. Strength for the usual climbing, jumping and holding airlocks open. Speed for running away, acting before someone else or getting out of dodge. Intellect for thinking through problems, inventing or fixing things. And finally, combat for fighting for your life. Saves are again a D100 and done in the exact same way as stats. There are 3 types of saves. Sanity for rationalising things, fear for keeping a level head while everyone around you is losing theirs, and body to stop alien chest bursters from infecting you. It tells you here what high score is. Well, in a game as self-descriptively deadly as Mothership, your high score is the number of sessions you've survived, though you can use it for other things such as your reputation, or even as a spendable luck score. Repurpose it as you will. After this is modifying stat checks as saves. We have advantage and disadvantage, which plays out like all games that use this mechanic. Critical successes happen when you roll doubles on a stat check. Something good always happens when this occurs, and similarly when a double over your score is rolled, it's a critical failure and something bad always happens. In Mothership, a 99 is a critical failure and a 00 is a critical success. Also, a panic check is made when a roll has failed. Skills relevant to the situation can affect the roll, adding the skill's bonus to the stat or save. It also, in a small box out here, gives an example of when a warden should call for a check. The next section is stress. The horrors of the cosmos can have a dramatic effect on someone, and stress is used to measure this, edging the character nearer to panic. The higher your stress, the nearer you get to panicking, and the more stress you have, the worse the panic is. Stress is, as previously explained, gained by failing a stat or save check, and sometimes entities or even locations can automatically give you stress via interaction or witnessing it. Everyone starts the game with 2 stress, and it can be increased or decreased in-game. The maximum stress a character can have is 20, and anything over and above that reduces the relevant stat or save by that amount. Stress is relieved by resting in a safe place. This is attempted by rolling against your worst save. You reduce it by the 1s roll on the D100. For example, if your stress was 30 and you rolled a 25, you would reduce it by 5. Failing a stress relief roll gives you another point of stress. Advantage can be gained to this roll by having consensual sex, using drugs in a recreational manner, having a night drinking, or even a night of deep prayer, though in an unsafe location, this could be rolled at disadvantage. Additionally, stress is not relieved when in cryosleep, and shore leave can convert stress into improved saves. We have a box out here in regard to sex, where it essentially says to make sure that everybody at your table is on board before allowing it in your game. Next, we move to panic. A culmination of stress, damage and emotional erosion can tip characters over their breaking point. Panic checks determine whether a character has kept their cool. In order to do this, they roll on the panic die, a d20, and try to roll higher than their current stress. Less than their current stress means they've failed, and they look up the result on this table here. This can range from an adrenaline rush, which gives a plus to all rolls for 2d10 minutes and removes d5 stress right away, up to a heart attack or short circuit if they're an android, though the ultimate result is simply the character is retired on the spot. Panic checks are made any time a critical failure is rolled on a stress or save, or other appropriate times such as watching a crewmate die, or whenever death feels like a foregone conclusion, or even whenever the player deems it should be appropriate. Some of the results in the panic table have lasting effects on the person, and they could gain a condition that needs to be treated. We have a final box out here which stresses that panic results that may cause problems for your gaming group should be removed, and that nobody should feel genuinely uncomfortable. Then we have the skill section. These, as you may presume, are representations of knowledge, craft and techniques in specific fields. The player adds their skill bonus to the relevant stat or save. All classes start with a list of skills, and new ones can be gained by training and study. Any skill with a +0 is considered no skill, though you can attempt it, even if it could be rolled with disadvantage. Then there are trained skills, or those are +10, the equivalent to a bachelor's degree. A list is provided here. There are expert skills, or those are +15. Those are the equivalent of a doctorate, and are considered a subset of a trained skill, all listed here. And then there are master skills, or those are +20. Anyone with a skill at this level are considered specialists in their field, listed here. It then changes focus to skill training. Time and money need to be invested into training. Trained skills take 2 years and 10,000 credits in materials. Expert skills take 4 years and 50,000 credits in materials. And master skills take 6 years and 200,000 in materials. You cannot skip directly to Master without going through Trained and Expert skills. Training takes so long due to the assumption that characters are working full-time. If they study full-time, the training takes half as long. It gives an example of skill training and then moves to military training. This is the exception to the rule because A, it's free, and B, the character needs to sign on for a 6-year term with the local Colonial Marine Regiment. In order to find out what happens to the character in military service, they make a combat check. A success means they gain military training, athletics and 2 trained skills. They gain plus 10 combat and reduce another stat by 10, as well as gaining the Marine's trauma response. A critical is a success, but they may take the expert skill instead of 2 trained skills. A failure means they gain military training, athletics and 1 trained skill, as well as the Marine's trauma response. A critical failure means they're killed in action. Okay, so now we move on to the appropriately named violent encounters. A turn is split into 10-second intervals called rounds, and everything essentially happens at the same time. The warden will then explain the situation, including the most likely outcome should nobody act, and then they work around a table, describing what their character would do. Once the stakes are understood and a course of action is committed to, all actions are resolved at once, with assigned stat or save checks. Everyone rolls and damage or wounds are taken, and then the warden describes the situation as is again and a new round starts. Surprise is usually dealt with when characters are ambushed or stunned by a terrifying encounter, requiring a fear save. Success means they can act, failure means they're too shocked to do anything. There is a box out describing what to do if your group wants a strict turn order, which I imagine to prevent people talking over each other is probably a good one. In this instance, everyone should make a speed check with those who succeed going before the hostiles and the rest afterwards. Of course, if the situation changes dramatically, they should be rolled again. We have an example of this called The Thing That Was Phil, which is pretty good, and then we move on to a question: what can I do? The simple answer is that they can move somewhere in close range and perform one action, and that one should imagine a real-life scenario. It gives a list which it stresses is non-exhaustive of the kind of things you could do. Things such as make an attack, bandage someone, reload a weapon, etc. If you decide to do nothing, then you can move to long range. It gives us a little box out about being effective in a fight, pointing out that your combat stat isn't the only thing that matters, noting some important things you could do in lieu of just engaging in a firefight. Following this, we move on to attack and defence. The simple "how do I attack" is answered thus. You make a combat check and if successful, roll the weapon's damage, subtracting it from the enemy's health. If you miss, you gain 1 stress. Damage is taken off your health, and when it reaches 0 you gain a wound, rolling on the wound table here, based on the kind of weapon that is used. After this, health is restored to maximum and you start again. Once the maximum wounds is reached, they make a death save. Armour essentially subtracts from damage, though if a hit is greater than the armour point value, then it's destroyed and they take any damage that carries over. Some weapons have an anti-armour quality which ignores and destroys armour when they hit. Other armour has damage reduction which will absorb damage even if it's destroyed in the process. We have some rules for cover, illustrated in this little table here, ranging from insignificant to heavy, and when you fire from cover you're considered out of cover for your next turn. This is followed by a section called What Are Wounds? When you gain a wound, as previously mentioned, you roll on this table using a d10. It narrows the kind of wounds you can receive into 5 categories: blunt force, bleeding, gunshot, firing explosives, and gore and massive. Wounds have a severity which are flesh wounds, minor injuries, major injuries, lethal injuries, and fatal injuries. It moves on to death, where it advises that if you know your end is near, to make your remaining time left count. Death saves are done by putting a d10 in a cup, shaking it and then placing it face down. When someone checks to see if you are alive, you reveal a die and refer to this table. Range and distance are next. It's abstracted down to 4: adjacent, close range, long range and extreme range, and this should be viewed at in human terms. Adjacent is exactly what you can imagine, and close range is someone it would take a few seconds to get to if running. Long range is far enough that it takes an entire round, and extreme is something that a rifle could hit. The next section is called Survival. Here it details some of the most common problems that characters could face while exploring space. It details differing atmospheres such as toxic and corrosive, as well as bleeding caused by wounds. There is cryosickness from using sleep pods to place them in a suspended animation for long periods of space travel, and we have exhaustion, which is what you would expect it to be. Food and water are detailed, a real problem in space, and obviously oxygen starvation, pointing out that you can last 15 seconds in space without oxygen. I'd be interested to know how that was discovered. It gives calculations for groups and slow decline before dying. It also points out that androids don't consume oxygen, and those in cryosleep do not reduce the oxygen supply. There is radiation, of which there are 3 levels: trace, acute and lethal, and there is stimpak overdose, and then temperatures, extreme cold and extreme heat. After this, perhaps predictably, is medical care. It details short and long-term memory recovery, including an example and a table of medical treatments with their cost and a description of what they do. Following this section, we have a double-page spread of an example of play, which is not bad, and then we move on to ports. It details the different kinds of ports. They range from the likes of X-class ports, i.e. those known for their pirate bases and criminal settlements, right the way through to S-class ports. These are the likes of luxurious plazas, palatial estates and pleasure spas for the uber-wealthy. These are usually heavily guarded and by invite only. It goes into shore leave, essentially downtime, where they can convert stress into improved saves. The cost for shore leave is dependent on the type of port, though once this price is paid, they make a sanity roll. A success converts stress into improved saves based on where they stay. A critical converts all stress. A failure doesn't convert any, but reduces their stress to the minimum, and they then gain 1 for failing the save. A critical failure doesn't convert any, and they need to make a panic check. Each point of stress converts to improving a save by 1, divided however the player wants. Shore leave usually takes around 2d10 days and can be abstracted however the group prefers, though it does make a suggestion that small buffer adventures could be done while there. The final section details contractors, those people who are looking to work for a ride, act as an extra ship's hand or to help in a fight, though you need to be careful not to hire the wrong people. Contractors are much easier to stat out than characters. They have a combat stat, an instinct one which covers fear, sanity, body, speed and intellect and anything else you can think of, and max wounds. Any damage they take counts as a wound when they reach their max, and when they reach their max they die. And loyalty, which is a save that is rolled whenever their loyalty is tested. They start with 2d10 plus 10 loyalty that is rolled after they are hired. They also have a motivation that will always supersede their loyalty. Contractors are hired by paying them a month's salary at the beginning of the month, and they can often demand hazard pay when they have to face danger, which is usually D5 months worth of pay. None or partial payment results in a loyalty save penalty. There is a table to roll contractors on here, using a D100, which ranges from surgeons, archaeologists, engineers, or even a void urchin, though it doesn't explain what that is here. Loyalty can be improved. If they survive jobs and are paid in full, it can range from 1 to D10 depending on the circumstances. Contractors usually have all the basic tools to perform their work, and are usually controlled by the person who hired them, and it makes a point that they can make great replacement characters for those who die in the line of duty. Following this, we have a double-page character sheet, and on the back cover we have all the rules to play the game. As minimalist space systems go, Mothership is a game that seems to have really struck a chord. The success of the Kickstarter looks to have confirmed this, as none of the old-school aesthetics of the original Zero Edition have been compromised at all. I mean, yes, the art's been improved, but that's most often a good thing. And the print book is of decent quality with the paper having a nice thickness to it, and the size seems to have been done in order to make it easily transportable. And honestly, I don't think this would suit being in a big hardback. As it is, it's nice and simple. The game seems to drive an almost OSR sense of character death. I mean, the fact that you have a literal high score counter on your character shows your days really are numbered, and as long as you play into that kind of vibe, then character death should not be feared but ultimately expected. Released at a time when this kind of space survival type game wasn't exactly abundant, Free League later released the Alien RPG, and as such, one may have subsequently thought that people would abandon Mothership for the original space horror as a licensed product, but this was not the case. Mothership continued to flourish. It's a game that people genuinely have affection for, and with good cause. The system is straightforward and makes no bones about your chances. No false hope is offered here. You're warned from the off about how dangerous the game is. The mounting stress mechanic is really well done, and it's nice to see a system as punishing as Mothership that doesn't offer any kind of caveat beyond the saving throw. The book is lean and mean, having well-explained rules and a good focus on nastiness rather than extensive character building, leaving that kind of thing up to the player to decide how to live out their short but hopefully sweet time among the stars. The art throughout the book varies from scratchy sketch to full-blown art pieces, of which 1 or 2 are clearly H.R. Geiger influenced. Not that that's a bad thing. However, I think that the cover best illustrates the ultimate end of most players in Mothership. I played Mothership last year for the first time after hearing about it for years, and it absolutely lived up to its reputation as only 2 people survived, and what struck me was that it became abundantly clear that this is a game that flourishes at the table. The system character concept and situations are easy to grasp, and its major focus is how the players deal with just plain bad things, whether that be floating alone in a spacesuit in the inky blackness of space watching your oxygen slowly tick down, joining a band of marines as they try to gun down a horrific many-legged alien atrocity that has invaded the port you've docked in, or trying to find out which strange doppelganger species has taken over one of your friends. It's all to be expected here. Mothership is a game that I feel is just beginning its journey to join other space classics such as the likes of Traveller, though for completely different reasons. And with the PDF being free on DriveThruRPG and having a stack of really good scenarios released for it, what are you waiting for? I give Mothership a 10 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I'll put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon or even becoming a member of my YouTube channel. But out.